So today we are talking about term limits. I think it was yesterday. Nancy Pelosi announced that she wouldn't seek re-election. So I think when her current term ends, um, which is 2027, that she wouldn't seek re-election. She would effectively retire from Congress. And so kind of looking into it and doing a little bit of researching, figuring out a little bit of her backstory, Nancy Pelosi spent 40 years, 4 decades in Congress. So let's talk about it. So Nancy Pelosi, she's been in Congress. She's been a member of Congress for 4 decades, 40 years. That is a very long time. And so I did some research and kind of looked into a couple of things and wanted to talk about, the idea of term limits. There's a good argument for term limits and there's a good argument against term limits, and I think Nancy Pelosi is a really, really good example. So here is a woman who has been, again, 40 years, very, very long time. And, the thing with term limits that you have to understand is that, without them, as long as you can get your constituents to believe in you, as long as you can raise enough money, as long as you can, get enough votes, you can effectively stay in Congress for as long as you like. Another person that comes to mind is like Mitch McConnell on the Republican side. He's been in Congress for a really, really long time. So here are just, a couple of my thoughts. When I think about term limits, when I think about Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi, I really feel like, simply put, 40 years is just way, way too long. I'm a big believer that term limits are simply necessary. I think that we get to a point where we truly need, generational change. I think we need, fresh ideas and new perspectives. And I don't think that comes from someone who has been in Congress for that long. I think, you're not going to get that same perspectives that you might get from a newer generation. You're not going to get that same experience that you would from someone that, was born in the 80s or the 90s, as opposed to someone that was born in the 40s or 50s that's still working, in Congress. I simply think that it's important to really put term limits into effect. 4 years, 8 years, 6 years, however long it is. But 40 years seems to be pushing it. I've got some notes down here in front of me because I want to make sure that I'm mentioning everything that I truly want to mention in this video. On the flip side of things, the fact that she's had, such a storied experience in Congress is truly amazing. I mean, here's a woman who, again, has been around for 4 decades. She's been Speaker of the House, and she has truly, she's been a big part of why even like Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, was passed and things like that. So I think on the flip side of things is someone who is able to gather a lot of power, a lot of experience, certainly in Congress, in terms of, negotiating with people and things of that nature. I think as a result of that time in Congress, you gather a lot of power, you gather a lot of influence, you know? Um, and I think that's a big reason. That's a big reason why, she was able to get things passed and able to negotiate, reach across the aisle, as they say, and kind of just truly get things done. So I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say about the topic. Are you for or against term limits? Why or why not? You know, for a woman who's been around for 40 years in Congress, yeah, you're able to get a lot of things done, but you might have, you know, different perspectives and different way of doing things that may or may not be effective anymore. So I guess we'll just have to see where this goes.